Thanks for listening to Games by Design. I'm your host, Zach, and I'll introduce the others in a minute here, but I've got a few words first of all for our goal for the show overall. So Games by Design is a kind of journal that we're using to collect and record our game design thoughts and the lessons that we learned along the way. And we put it on YouTube so that you can join us on that journey and kind of learn with us or throw your 2 cents in on the conversations that we have. So recently we've also started creating our own little games. And we're making these to test design ideas and processes and see how our theories work when you actually try to put them in a game instead of just talking about them in isolation. So in this episode, we're actually going to talk about the 5 short games that we've made in the last year to review the lessons that we've learned from actually, making these things, like I said, instead of just talking about abstract game design principles. So today I'm joined by the guy behind our soundtracks and sounds for these games, and that's Noah. Say hi, Noah. How you doing?
Hello. I'm great. I'm really excited.
And the dude as well who's responsible for the visual style and visual design for our recent projects, and that's Nick.
Hello.
And we're just going to go ahead and get us started here. Beyond the Sight of God. So this is our first game, a story game that we made with no environments, only a few character assets. We made it using Twine originally because we didn't even know how to use Fungus, which is what we did for most of the rest of them. And our goal originally was to finish it in 1 day, but I think we took 3 for the first release. There was obviously some patching and fixing that we did later. The version we're looking at right now is the one that we rebuilt in Fungus, in Unity using Fungus. So Noah, you made a lot of music and sound assets for this game, and you were kind of just let loose on this project to make whatever sounds you thought it needed. It was kind of a fast and loose kind of a thing. So thinking about this first project versus the 4 projects that we made afterward, have you changed your approach much to creating the soundscape?
Yeah, so I used for reference sake, I used GarageBand to make the soundtrack for this because it was on my iPad already and it was free and I didn't know what I was doing. And this is the first time I'd ever soundtracked anything before, but you're right. It was really fast and loose. I don't think there was a planning stage. I'm pretty sure I just sat down and made the song in about an hour. The main theme for this game, because there were a couple other ones, but the main theme in particular was what I put most of the effort into. And there wasn't any planning, there wasn't any post processing really. It was sort of just sit down, make the song, and then let's get into the game as fast as possible. And I think it shows, but I do think, I still actually really am quite proud of the of the main theme, at least for this one. I thought it was really good.
It's quite ominous.
Yeah,
and I thought you did a good job, especially having done it in the 1 day. I say we did it in 3 days. I think what ended up happening was I was working on it for 3 days, and you guys kind of finished it within 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Because I was doing all the writing and everything, and you guys actually cranked it all out a lot faster.
I think we had a couple of all of us sitting in one big room together. I want to say we had 2 days where we did that, where it was just one long. You came over in the morning to our house, and we just whiled away all the day long, and then a third day that kind of I think was more you writing. Yeah,
and that actually brings me to another question here that I was thinking about but didn't write down. So surprise question. That was the only time that we really sat down and worked all together in one room all day. And I'm curious about, because the rest of the games we all kind of worked remote, or we'd meet occasionally to talk about things or go over stuff that we've done. How is that first project process where we all sit down and work in one place versus the other ones where we kind of worked independently and kind of put it together afterward for you guys?
I thought it was kind of magical, honestly. I thought it was there's definitely advantages to a more long form approach and a more separate approach where everyone can kind of dig into their own work. But for me, in the art department particularly, I remember we had these hourly check-ins. That was kind of the way we did it. It was okay, everybody, we're going to do this for the next hour, and we'll all check in an hour and see what everyone's done. And what that meant was you just churned out as much content as you could in an hour. And you had these micro time limits, right? And so I'd be drawing these character designs. And is this good enough? You know what? I want to get through 4 character designs in this hour. So I can't actually spend more than 15 minutes on this guy. So I think he's good enough. And I felt just for speed's sake, it was really, really nice.
Yeah, it was
micro
stupid
time
fast.
Limits.
Yeah.
It was
very
really
efficient in that, and when we were working all together. And it kind of makes me think of, you ever see those pictures of early Apple where it's just the guys in the garage and they're all wearing turtlenecks and they're sweating and stuff like that. I'm yeah, magical.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good for morale, I thought, to all be in the same room and working together at the same time.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It just really felt like a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
A great way to kick off our game jam journey, I think.
I agree. Yeah, it was a good we start together, and then even though we've kind of spread out and for subsequent projects worked a little more independently, starting that way was, I agree, it was a cool way to start. It felt good.
Yeah.
So I got another question for you, Nick, then. So you made some characters for this one, is most of what you did. You did a few other things like the door or the altar or whatever, just art assets, you know?
Yeah.
And a similar question to what I asked Noah, like in what way have you changed your approach for creating those art assets in the subsequent 4 games that we did after this one?
Oh, it's a good question. This one, I remember being an entirely like iteration-free process. It was like the first iteration of everything was what went in the game, just because of how quickly we were doing it. I think for all these other game jams we did, we weren't trying to do it in a day. I think the next one we did a week and so forth. And so it meant that it was really quick. There was no like concepting versus like in some of the later ones, I would send you like sketches, like, hey, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. I actually still am really pleased with the art direction for this game. I think it's very moody, and I think coupled with Noah's soundtrack and your writing, I really quite like the vibes. But something that was kind of nice was that I didn't have time to like toil over, oh, what's the art direction for this game going to be? It was just what I made. And I think it's ironic.
Shoot from the hip.
Yeah, exactly. That shooting from the hip, I still feel like this one has one of the stronger visual styles of the stuff that I've made. So I just think that's funny. Aside from this mercenary guy with his ugly, fuzzy outline, that really bugs me.
I think that's actually something that didn't appear in the original build when we did it in Twine. I think that was something that happened afterward when we built it in Unity.
That's really funny. Game design.
I saw something like that in some of the other ones too.
Yeah.
All right, with Friends Like These, project number 2, a much more ambitious project, but kind of a similar kind, at least like mechanically and everything. It's a story game with dialogue choices. For this one, our team size more than doubled. So it was the 3 of us for the first one, and then we had the 3 of us plus 2 other writers and editor, and then someone kind of doing a little bit of like titles and text and that kind of thing. So I remember, so that was the big difference, I think, was just moving from like 3 people to like 7 people or 6. How is that? 6? 7? Anyway, my math is terrible. I'm the programmer. And then, so we tried to do this one in a week, but I think we ended up pushing it to 10 days, which is kind of a pattern for the next couple as well. So that's this one. And we'll start with a question for you, Nick. This time, every character and location had an asset, and you were given more like specific instructions to create them this time. So how was it working with that kind of direction, especially versus the previous game? And what lessons do you kind of take from that experience?
Yeah, well, first, let me just direct your attention to these magnum opus backgrounds, just my finest artwork I have ever created. Just really astounding. Really, really proud of those. I just like you can tell that's where most of my time and attention went. These characters are kind of secondary. No, joking aside,
I think you did those in an hour, right? You did like all of them.
I did every background for this game in an hour because
right.
that was the time limit, and that was I'd been agonizing over how to do them. Well, I'd started a job the same week, so I was super busy, and there was just some things didn't line up so great, but yeah. So the as far as like receiving more clear direction and stuff like that, it was a lot of fun. It was nice. The character descriptions gave me a lot to work with. There wasn't, I think we talked about, for instance, there's a character in this game called Nucleus, right? And he's this big, ugly, roided up. He's got all kinds of augments. He's supposed to be all cybernetic, but it was nice. I still had a lot of creative freedom. You didn't tell me I want him to have this implant and this implant. And so like, there's nowhere in the story that it says this guy with the tubes coming out of his nose has tubes coming out of his nose. I just thought they looked cool. And so there was still like a lot of creative freedom in there, but it was fun to have like more defined characters that I could like kind of work in details. I had a good time. I still kind of prefer the art direction of the first game, if I'm being honest. I am pleased with the way these guys turned out, but the way they've mixed with the backgrounds and each other, I think it would have been beneficial for me to be able to see how everything was going to look in-game. Something about the simple nature of just a black background with characters meant that it wasn't hard to make everything look like it belonged in the same world, but I feel like this game kind of struggled a little bit, feeling like all of the assets were cohesive. Still very proud of it, but yeah.
Well, yeah, you did good work. I mean, those backgrounds, though.
I know. Look
so-
at that. Wow. What is that? 4 shapes and some lighting effects?
Yeah, it's not bad, though.
like
I
the
think
marks
this
that
one
you-
we're looking at might be my favorite, actually, the green one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool color. So I might have some more questions for you if you have time, but we'll circle
Yeah.
back to you in a second because I want to ask Noah something.
Mm-hmm.
So Noah, I think you did like 12 songs for this game or
I
something
think
like
it was,
that.
yeah, 12.
And you did that all in a week. And so I wanted to know, how was it for you having that deadline for that much work? And did it like put a fire into you and like galvanize you, like give you a whole bunch of motivation to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Was it overwhelming? Like how was working with that deadline for your workflow and productivity?
Yeah, no, it was tricky, and I think that because of the short deadline and the amount of songs that I made, it was definitely when you listen to the songs. Well, I mean, I don't think most of the songs are less than a minute long, and a lot of them are very simple loops. I still actually am quite proud of a lot of them, and this is probably still my favorite soundtrack I've worked on, and especially in terms of workflow. I really enjoyed the workflow for it. But yeah, it meant I made a lot more songs, and they were a lot shorter. So there were most of the songs are like 20-30 second loops at most. Other than like the main theme, it certainly felt great churning out 2 to 3 songs a day and just immediately sending them to you and then seeing, hearing them them within the context of the characters and whatnot. That was really exciting. And I think that was something that I really liked about this process as opposed to like the first one that we did, was that where I was able to sort of see my work in tandem with everybody else's a bit more because it was spread out over a long week as opposed to 3 days or 1 day or whatever we did for the last one. And the soundtrack has my favorite song of mine, or one of my favorite songs of mine. Who Needs Him is the one, which is funny because it actually didn't end up in the game, but I felt really good about this. This was the last GarageBand song before I kind of changed up, flipped the script a bit too.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So this was the last one you did with GarageBand.
Yeah, I mean, I technically did it for the dating one, but that was a bit different.
Yeah, the dating one was a bit different.
We'll get there.
To that. Yeah. It's interesting to me that you said that this is the soundtrack that you might be the most proud of because, like you said, you didn't have as much time to work on each of the songs. Like you had to kind of keep them short and sweet. But the previous one, you kind of had like that one big song that you were able to do. I just find that kind of interesting. Do you have any like insight into why that might be?
I think that it really is that people always talk about like the idea of like creativity being really bolstered by constraints, and I think that's true. I really do think that's true, that like when a lot of the time the best work that you make tends to come from when you are really limited in how you make it, because you just have to figure out what corners to cut and what processes to streamline. And I think that was what made this one so exciting, was that I just couldn't sit down and make a 3-minute song for every 3 or 4 minute song with dynamic and all sorts of varying devices used in it. I had to keep it really simple, and so it meant that each song had to be memorable because they were so simple.
Witch Hunter, our third game. In Witch Hunter, you're in a prison compound, and you need to convince the other prisoners to give you ingredients for a sandwich. This is our first game with movement controls, and you can see we're in like a first-person space here. We got a little bit of limited voice acting, a heck of a lot of other stuff that we just never had before we came here. It's the first game that lets the player approach it in whatever sequence that they want to, there's no story that they gotta follow beat by beat in the proper order. So, Noah, I'm gonna start with you this time. This was the first time that you used real instruments. Did that present any new or unexpected challenges for you?
Yeah, the biggest being that I realized that my timing sucked and I needed a better internal metronome, because when I do that with GarageBand or any sort of DAW that is electronic, I don't have to worry about it as much. It sort of self-corrects and you can make tiny adjustments here and there. But when I sat down with the drum that we use, the cajon, or the little djembe that we borrowed, or that I borrowed, I realized after playing it and then listening back, I went, oh gosh, wow, that was bad. And then I had to do that quite a few times. So it took a lot more takes to get the music that I really liked. But I will say that of all of the songs, I know I said that one of my favorites was in the last game, but of all the songs, I think that the theme for this game might be my favorite piece of music that I've made for a game. I still go back and I listen to it and I just like start grooving and grin. It was so much fun to make. It was so much fun to make. It was absolute blast.
It's so catchy. It would get stuck in my head. I was singing it for days, telling it.
Me too. And my wife liked it so much that she asked me to download it for her and give her a copy of the MP3. So yeah, that was a good song. It came out real good. And I've used it in some of our YouTube videos after that. Holy cow, Mildred's tall in this game. I think we shrunk her down for the next one.
Yeah, I think we did.
Kind of weird flirting with her now, knowing what we know about her later. So, that's good. You actually kind of talked already about my next question, which is like some of the trade-offs between using real instruments versus digital ones, with like the timing being a thing.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, even though this is your favorite song that you've done, that you're planning to use digital instruments for our next project. I just find that interesting that it kind of depends on the game, it seems like. It's not like a one principle where you should always do it one way or the other way.
Yeah, I think that with a game like this, I knew that there was really only going to be one song, because it's a pretty intimate, tiny game. It all takes place in the same room. There's not really a lot of narrative, emotional change. It's kind of one note for the most thing. It's pretty silly and kind of and goofy, so I didn't have to worry so much about it being about having more than one piece. And so I knew, well, it's all right if it's just 3 instruments that I use for this, because I don't have to worry about using these 3 instruments a dozen times to make a dozen different sounds. And so for this next one that we're doing, I thought, well, I kind of I want to branch out a bit and actually use instruments that I don't own, which is, I think, the biggest trade-off that comes with doing physical instruments, other than my skill to use them, is that I don't have that many instruments. I only have 4. I have a guitar, a mandolin, a recorder, and a cajon. And so with digital, I've got hundreds, if not thousands, of options that I can utilize. And I'm really looking forward to messing around with that for this next one. So.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see it. I do really like the track you did for the Brian Kelly game a minute ago that we were looking at with the digital stuff there. I thought it came out good, so I'm sure the next one will be good too. So so Nick, then this is the first time that your 2D assets were placed in like a physical space.
Yeah.
You've mentioned to me before that you really like the 2.5D look with the flat characters hanging out in this 3D world. So my question for you is, if we were able to just as easily do 3D character models and get them the way that we wanted, would you continue to sometimes prefer this style of the flat sprites in a 3D world, depending on the game, and what do you find so compelling about that look?
Yeah, well, I think it would be just a matter of workflow, because if you can get 3D, there's just a lot you can do through animation that you that is trickier in a frame by frame approach, and it's harder to measure depth and stuff like that. For a game like this, where it's mostly conversation and stuff like that, I really enjoy that you can kind of just insert a drawing into the game. I don't know if you can tell, I had so much fun with this game. It was just an absolute blast for me. And I think it's still one of my favorite looking ones. In fact, I think it might be my favorite looking of the bunch.
It's got a look.
I think so. I think that's something that I like about this 2D style is that basically I can take my 2D art that I've been developing for as long as I've been drawing, and quite I don't know. You can throw it into the 3D world, and all of that translates really well. There's not a whole lot lost from the 2D style in the 3D world. Obviously, you don't have all of the interactions you could have with the 3D environment, but I think for something like this, I really I do like the way it looks a lot.
I do too. I think you're right. I think this one might have the strongest visual style to it of the games we've made. Mildred in the Forest, our horror experiment, and the first game we made with AI pathfinding. First time we used the Unity terrain tool, which I thought was a ton of fun. This game presented me with the most bugs and design issues out of anything we've made so far. And it was just the most complicated game, mechanically speaking. So Nick, we're talking about this with Witch Hunter, but
yeah.
When you compare Mildred to Witch Hunter,
yeah,
this game to the previous one, how do you find the blend of 2D assets and 3D environments? How did the trees and the terrain match stylistically with the rest of the game for you?
Short answer, I don't think it's as cohesive. I think that there's just looking at that tree texture and looking at that arm texture, maybe that's because, that's a tree texture that we pulled from the internet. It might be a different thing if I was to make a tree texture that we then put on a 3D object, but we did not do that for this one. I think the ground textures also might be, I don't actually remember if I made those or if...
Yeah, those are yours. Those are from the previous game.
Okay,
yeah.
They're just from the
previous game. So the green is, the grass is the...
Okay, yeah, this one I didn't recognize, yeah.
Yeah.
Those actually blend quite nicely. Yeah, I think that there's a... It's a good question. There's a part of me that still wonders what this game would be like if it had the trees from from Witch Hunter. I still wonder what that would look like. I think it'd definitely be different, but I think it might look more cohesive. I think there's also just a general spread outness to this game that makes it feel like when you do find a 2D item, they're so sparse and there's so few of them. Right? I think at some of our plans we were talking about putting bushes in and like a lot more 2D elements. So the fact that there's like, I don't know, 8 2D elements in this game and the rest is all just 3D definitely makes it feel a little less cohesive. So
I agree.
Also the fact that arm is just stock still.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I mean, all those things were things that we wanted to do. Like your original artistic vision was that the arm was moving. You even gave me like an animation for it. There was a lot of that kind of thing. You even gave me assets for the world that you wanted me to use that I just didn't have time or couldn't figure out how to make it work or whatever.
Yeah, like
so
the
I think
trees.
the vision originally was actually closer to what you're talking about. It was just because of time and challenge, it was got a bit kind of lost in the shuffle there.
Yeah, because if I recall, you'd have to have figured out a whole program for like painting on trees that were custom made instead of using this other one that like you'd have to have placed every one of those trees individually if we'd done the 2D approach.
Right, I think that was one of the problems, yeah. And I think that I actually probably could do it now because I took out so many of the trees. Like before it was like 100, 200 trees or something.
Yeah.
Then we realized that, oh, she got me. Then we realized that that was causing pathfinding issues. So
Yeah.
So I could probably do it now because I could probably just replace each tree with a 2D one. It might be something worth looking into actually if we ever want to patch it.
Mildred in the Woods remastered, or Mildred in the Forest remastered.
Remastered, the remake.
The remake, yeah.
That would be an easy fix. There's so many like big problems with this game that
Yeah.
I still need to figure out, but
Yeah.
that's okay. It was a good learning thing. So Noah, this game had some of our most complicated kind of musical work. At least that's what it seemed like to me from my end.
Yeah.
I'm talking about what you had to do with each musical track kind of featuring layers. Like the song they play at the campfire, like those are all separate layers, the flute and the guitar. It's just two, but also like the ambiance layers and the overall in the woods kind of sound. Like there was like 5 levels to that. Like they would kind of like layer on top of each other as you progressed.
Mm-hmm.
So how was it creating that layered ambiance track? Was that a fun challenge? Was it really challenging? And then how do you like how it turned out in the end?
It's interesting because I'm kind of like hesitant to call the ambiance that plays when you're just walking around music because it's not really very musical. It's it's more atmospheric than anything. But as for making the layering effects, it was pretty easy. I used Audacity for this one. This one was all me recording through Audacity. I didn't use GarageBand or any other DAW. It was just Audacity because it's free and that's cool.
Down to the sound effects too, right?
Down to the sound effects. I was okay. That I'm glad you brought that up because I wasn't going to mention it. I was so proud of the sound effects that I made for this game. I went outside and I picked up leaves and grass and sticks and I brought them in my room and I put them on a big mat on my desk and I would like take my boot and I'd like press it in. And anyway, it was so much fun. The birds that you hear in this are also me. I'm the owls just going whoo. Anyway, super fun. But when it comes to like making the layers, it was really easy. It was really really easy to do. Because I would just for like the 5 layered ambiance that plays when you're just walking around. I just made 5 layers. It was really easy. Some of them I would just copy and paste and then like lower them an octave or a few pitches to just give it, a freaky sort of dissonance. And then when I was done, I would just export each individual track and send them to you. And it was kind of a cinch. I think you probably did more work than I did, but not
by much though.
I was really, really pleased with the campfire song. Being able to hear the guitar closer when you're close to the guitarist, and then the flute recorder thing when you're closer to the girl.
That was
cool. That was really fun. I thought that turned out really well, and that added a lot to making it feel like it was actually in the world.
I agree. I actually really liked that. Because we originally, I think we had 2 options. You had like one where the flute and the guitar were on the same track, and we could have just played that as a unit. But I really like that we went through just a little bit of extra trouble and had the flute sound originate with the girl and the guitar sound originate with the guy, like the objects in the world. So if you're close to the guy, the guitar was louder. If you're close to the girl, the flute was louder. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
Speed dating, the silliest game ever. This was a different one. Like it says on the screen here, it was made to showcase different writing talents from just a creative writing group that we kind of just found in the area. And these characters are all over the place. These stories, these dialogues are all over the place because they were all written by someone different, and there was no effort to unify them at all.
Yeah.
But personally, I found the tonal whiplash a little bit charming. I thought it was fun. You'd go just like all over the place from character to character, and I think a lot of people said the same thing. They thought that was a lot of fun, pretty funny. So Noah, let's start with you this time. You did one song.
One song.
5 games later, this is the last one we did. So this was like, you've learned everything that you've learned up to this point. Like how is it different? Like was it very different from like thinking about the first game? Like how had your approach changed? Had you refined your attack at all?
It was funny. I think for the most part, actually, it almost like was like I returned to the style of the first game of
Really?
Beyond the Sight of God, just because I don't want to say I phoned it in. I'm actually quite proud of the song. I thought it worked really well, but
It's cute.
because of the experimental nature of this game, I knew that it wasn't quite as important that the song fit tonally, because the game's so eclectic. I was like, all right, well, I'll just make the song kind of eclectic. That can work just fine. It's not as big of a deal. So I just made a song that I thought fit the sort of overarching tone as best as I could, but I didn't really dwell on it much more than that, other than just making sure that it felt right emotionally for the game. But I didn't put as much planning as I did for, say, the Brian Kelly With Friends Like These, or even Witch Hunter. It was a bit more like Beyond the Sight of God in terms of just how quickly I churned it out and sent it. I think I made it in a day or two. Probably, I think it was like a day, but I am still very pleased with it. It's definitely a bit different. It sort of stands out in terms of just style, much like this game does. So,
Yeah, there's strong stuff going on here with this game. So let's talk about. Well, I find that interesting actually. The fish, the freaking fish. So this is that whiplash we were talking about.
That you asked for that. That is your character.
So, I wrote this really like serious conversation, then I asked for a fish. It's true. I did that. It was my fault. So let's talk about the art then for this game. So Nick, this was a bunch of different stuff happened here, but the big thing that happened was that you had another artist kind of just appear randomly out of nowhere, fall into our lap and offer to help. And you were able to kind of step back from doing everything directly yourself, drawing every character and every environment. And you were able to focus instead on like directing this other artist that we had. And she did a great job.
Yeah, I think she did.
She was awesome to work with too, from what I could tell. So how was that experience for you working with this person, and what did you have to do differently, and what did you learn from that experience of working with another artist?
I came up with a character, I think was the first thing I did. I said, this is how I'm going to draw the characters, right? And I came up with one. I don't actually remember who it was I started with. It might have been the guy in the trench coat. And I just kind of like broke down everything that I did stylistically that might separate the way I draw from the way other people draw, right? I like down to like line thickness and canvas size and the kind of colors I was using and generally the kind of shapes. Nothing too specific, but just like, hey, I'm not worried about like high detail, like the hair textures don't need to be super realistic, just like it's mostly just about shapes and flat colors. This is the kind of shading I'm using, it's mostly like, it's pretty flat. I was experimenting with, I wanted to see how this 2-frame animation thing could work with less chunky, quirky looking characters. A little more like what I might normally draw for a commission a lot, and that was an interesting experience too. This was a lot more like drawing a bunch of commissions for a bunch of people than it was like coming up with characters, because every writer had their own physical description that they would input that determined how I was going to draw this character and stuff, which was a lot of fun. But working with the other artist was really cool because I got to offload some of it, which was a new experience for me. Eager to replicate. That was really nice. And I think there's a couple cracks here and there. You can see how we do a couple things a little bit differently, and there's like a little bit of a different approach. But really, I was really impressed by how, with the minimal instruction from me, she was able to replicate so much of what I was doing. I was really, really impressed by that.
And part of that was that I think she's just really good.
Yeah, that really helps.
Yeah, she has an eye for detail and an eye for that kind of thing, and she did a good job following your directions, I thought. This was the first time you ever made like a style guide, like you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
And I think that was great. I thought that helped me, even though I wasn't doing the art. It helped me to understand a little bit about what everything was going to look like and what to expect from future art that you were going to do for that project.
Yeah, and I think something that kind of shows here a little bit is that we had a style guide for the characters, but not beyond that. And so I think that just having more of that to unify it all would help in the long term. But overall, it was a really good learning experience. Quite a goofy, fun game. Really fun to watch people play this one and see who they decide to go on the second date with.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was. I think this was one of our most enjoyed games by the people who played it. It's like, it's short, it's easy to drop in and play. You can do the whole thing very quick, and then you just get basically just it's relaxing. It's kind of a cozy hangout and flirt with weirdos kind of a game. So
Yeah.
It's funny because it's the one that we were kind of just like messing around with and experimenting with the most.
it is. Yeah, I mean, like you said, you used the phrase phoning it in earlier, and like you're right, we didn't really phone it in, but we also like weren't pushing ourselves in a lot of ways to
Yeah.
make this one on our side with the three of us. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I realized I didn't have a character in the game and I wanted to write one, and so I 5 minutes wrote a character and sent it in.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, that wraps up like all of our games that we reviewed. Frankly, I think I'm quite encouraged by where we started with Beyond the Side of God, how we learned some lessons about doing narrative stuff, and how we learned some lessons about, like doing the art and the music through the next 4 games as well. I think our next game is going to be a bit more ambitious than the last one, the last speed dating one.
Quite a bit.
We're going to have to try some new skills like prototyping more frequently to get the balance just right. That's something that I think we learned from Mildred, because we just never got that right.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we just didn't prototype enough, and that's okay. We're still learning. There's nothing wrong with that. But I've had a really good time making these. It's really encouraging to see our work actually created into a game, and I had a really good time doing it with you guys. So thanks for your work on these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Thank
excited
you.
for this next one. It's really going to push me as a musician. I'm going to have to write 2 songs instead of 1.
Oh my God.
All right, guys. Well, thanks very much, and we'll do this again soon.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.